Over the past few years, I became pretty close with someone who I view as one of the most important writers, advocates, truth tellers in the world. My friend Gad Saad is going to be joining us momentarily. Yeah. Before he does, I want to introduce my friend Natasha Payne. She will be the moderator for this event. Natasha is one of the leaders of Stop Anti-Zionism. She works day and night to try to educate our community and anybody who will listen about the dangers of anti-Zionism. We've heard this word Zionism a million times. We know we're Zionists. Oh, they're anti-Zionists. It just means they're anti-us. But it's such a deeper problem rooted in historical discrimination towards the Jewish community, and we don't know enough. We gotta find our Zen. Natasha has written an incredible historical timeline. You gotta see this thing. A timeline of every single thing that happened in Jewish history. It's phenomenal. She's also now working and has worked on with her partner Nayelect on a delegation, on a designation, on a, what is it called now? Declaration. Designation. A declaration that is very important that a lot of the organizations have signed and that's starting to become more and more popular. This is the next era of anti-Semitism. I've said this before. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, Natasha Payne. Is that okay? She's very short. She's Jewish. This is our, you know. Is that better?
Okay, there. That's much better. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Oops. After the Soviet phase and the rise of the Islamic anti-Zionism, the anti-Zionist ideology entered its third stage, Western anti-Zionism. The groundwork was already laid. The Soviets had recoded the Jew as a Zionist, UN had equated Zionism as racism, and anti-Zionism had been radicalized across much of the Islamic world. When it entered the West, it took the form of the Red and the Green Alliance, the convergence of the progressive Marxist and the Islamist ideologies, repackaged through the language of human rights, social justice, and liberation. DEI and intersectional framework became its delivery system. Old libels were not abandoned, they were modernized. Israel became the symbolic source of global injustice. Jews were recast as privileged colonizers and oppressors, and anti-Zionism was framed as moral cause. The result was ideological capture. Jew hatred entered the moral mainstream and became socially sanctioned. And what made this phase especially so dangerous is that it's no longer resembled traditional hate. So it spoke the language of the compassion and social justice while denying those same rights of Jews. And like all forms of Jew hatred, anti-Zionism adapts across crossing ideological boundaries, taking root in both the far left and the far right, adopting whatever language gained legitimacy in each new era. The education panel will explore how these ideas captures academia and institutional culture and why understanding this evolution is essential in confronting anti-Zionism today. And when anti-Zionism enters the moral mainstream, it follows a predictable pattern, a cycle that begins with words, evolves into exclusions, escalates into violence, and ends with denial and erasures. That is the cycle of libels. And understanding that cycle is essential because history shows us that violence against Jews always begins with narratives. Associated Hebrew School has demonstrated what real moral leadership in education looks like. Their leadership understood something essential. If we want children to confront hatred, we must first teach them how hatred operates. So they made the courageous decision to teach students about the cycle of libel. And because when students can recognize the pattern, they develop critical thinking, resilience, and confidence to stand proudly in their identity. This is the world-leading Jewish education. This is how we break the cycle of libel. Please take a few moments to hear from these remarkable grade 8 students as they explain the cycle of libels in their own words.
Guys, can you believe what happened with my friend in public school? Another kid in the hall bumped into him and out of the blue called him a genocidal colonist.
Where do kids even learn words like that?
That's the scary part. Kids don't just invent these ideas. They hear them repeated, over and over, online, at protests, on social media, sometimes even at school.
And then people like your friend get bullied as a result of people repeating those rumors.
Yeah, like when a lie keeps on being repeated so much that people start thinking it's true. That's actually how a lot of hate begins.
Exactly. Throughout history, Jews have been the target of false accusations and conspiracy theories, and the pattern of Jew hatred has repeated for over 2,000 years.
It's a cycle of libels. This cycle of libels always starts with false accusations. Those false accusations are called libels and conspiracy theories.
Wait, what's a libel exactly?
Basically a made-up story about a group of people, accusing them of doing terrible things.
What's a conspiracy?
Things like conspiracy theories, saying Jews secretly control governments, money, or world events, even though these accusations are completely false.
Right. When libels and conspiracies are repeated enough times, people start to believe them. Jews start being seen as evil or even dangerous, even though it's not true.
Once people believe those lies, the next step happens.
Exclusion.
Jews get treated like outsiders.
Things like boycotts, public shaming, being blamed for everything, excluding Jews from sports or academic competitions, banning Jews from schools or jobs or public places.
Sometimes it even shows up in schools.
Like Jewish students being bullied just for being Jewish, or being blamed for things happening in another country.
So the libels and conspiracies make discrimination seem normal. Once people accept that discrimination and are demonized long enough, violence follows.
That's when the cycle moves on to step 3, violence.
It usually starts small and progresses slowly.
First, insults, harassment, graffiti, or even vandalizing Jewish places. Threats.
But history shows it can grow into something much worse.
During the Holocaust, lies against Jews led to genocide.
And we saw that violence against Jews again on October 7th and afterward.
And even today in Canada, there have been attacks on synagogues, Jewish schools, Jewish students, and teachers in public schools and universities.
But the cycle still isn't finished.
Right. The fourth step is denial.
After violence happens, people often start denying it.
They say it didn't happen.
Or they blame the victims.
Or try to erase history, so it looks like nothing ever happened.
And when that happens, the cycle starts all over again.
History teaches us something important.
What starts with words and slogans
End with real harm and violence.
When lies are repeated long enough, they start to turn neighbors against each other.
Before the Holocaust, lies about the Jews were repeated so often, people started to accept them.
Today, the language might change, but the pattern still repeats. But the cycle can be broken.
When we question libels and conspiracies,
Learn history, Jewish, and moral values.
and stand up to hate,
Understanding the cycle of libels helps us stop lies before they spread and make sure history never repeats itself.
AHS works continuously with growing minds to situate them deeply in Jewish identity. Our students take pride in the fact that each one of them is a member of an exclusive club, the Jewish people.
Welcome to Anti-Zionism in Educational Panel, the battle for academic integrity. Our panel will begin with Dr. Gad Saad, who is the author of Suicidal Empathy. Dr. Gad Saad is an evolutionary psychologist, professor at Concordia University's John Molson School of Business, and best-selling author of The Parasitic Mind and The Sad Truth About Happiness. A fierce defender of reason and free expression, he hosts the Sad Truth podcast and is a prominent cultural and political commentator. His forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, Dying to be Kind, examines the dangers of ideology-driven empathy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gad Saad, the World Symposium, and it's truly an honor and a privilege to have you with us today. My honor. I'm just going to ask you a question. It's my honor to have him here. Dr. Gad Saad will present how anti-Zionism captured educational institutions through Western suicidal empathy. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My remarks, I only have about 15 or so minutes. It won't be strictly about education, but rather about what anti-Zionism is as a most recent manifestation of Jew hatred. And so I'd like to begin with I'm very big on analogies, especially from biology. So let me compare Jew hatred to the immune system, the human immune system. So the human immune system did not evolve to only kill a specific set of pathogens. Because if it only evolved to only tackle pathogen P1, P2, and P3, once the pathogen mutates, which it's very good at doing, then you would be screwed. Because if there are no degrees of freedom in your immune system, you can't build up a response to a new pathogen. And therefore, the immune system has evolved adaptability as an adaptation, as an evolutionary adaptation. Well, I argue that Jew hatred, in a sinister way, is akin to the immune system in that it ever so evolves into new variants of Jew hatred. And so I'd like to mention here, I put together this list earlier today. So Jews, of course, are the killers of Christ. In Islam, Jews are descendants of pigs and monkeys. They're actually, the Arabic word is najis. Najis means impure. So the Jew is like urine, is like vomit, is like feces. They are impure. So that's from Islamic canons. Of course, we've got the blood libel. Jews make, matzah ball soup and so on with the goy's blood. Protocols of the learned elders of Zion. There's world domination of Jews. That's how we parasitize the world. Jews have no singular loyalty to the host nation. They have dual loyalty. Hitler said that Jews are literally a disease on the body politic of the Aryan nation. They are vermin and parasites. We now have the great replacement theory. Jews are the ones who control all of Western immigration. Some of you may have heard me mention that when I put up a clip on social media showing the names of all of the rapists in Britain, over 250,000 British white girls have been raped over the past 30 plus years all over England by Muslims, typically Pakistani Muslims. The response that I get is, what's your point? That's caused because of Jews. I said, how is it that it's Jews that are to blame for Muhammad gang raping your daughter? And the answer is, who let them in, Jew? So even when 3 Muhammads gang rape your daughter, it's Mordechai who's to blame. Of course, Jews also spread the bubonic plague, right? The Black Death in Europe. Jews spread COVID and also profiteered from the COVID vaccine. So on both ends, we were diabolical. Now, this one you may not know, although I have mentioned it recently on several shows. In 2010, there was several attacks by sharks in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is a resort town in the Red Sea in Egypt. And some Egyptian authorities, after a thorough investigation, concluded that the sharks were actually Zionist sharks. But I know it sounds funny, but you could just Google it. And so, because one of the ways by which Israel can attack their neighbors is by damaging them economically. And of course, the way you do that in this case is to make it scary for tourists to swim in that resort town. And so even the sharks are Zionist pigs. The Frankfurt School, I don't know if any of you know what the Frankfurt School is. Many of the parasitic ideas that I discuss in one of my earlier books, postmodernism, cultural relativism, and so on, unfortunately, some of them were actually promulgated by Jewish professors, and therefore, all of the world's ills that we're seeing today are due to the Jews. Communism, we have Karl Marx, a Jew, and so it becomes very, very easy to always connect the dots to the evil, diabolical Jew. Now, anti-Zionism is simply the latest mutated form of a long-standing Jew-hating virus. And so, again, you see the analogy with the immune system, how it mutates. Now, last Monday, actually, almost a week ago, I appeared for the 12th time on Joe Rogan's show. I don't know if many of you have had a chance to go and listen to it. When you go on Joe's show, you never really know what you're going to talk about. You could end up talking about, mating behavior of Sasquatch. I mean, literally. It's a very organic, free-flowing conversation. But I had, of course, hoped that we would spend quite a bit of time discussing my latest book, Suicidal Empathy. Can I engage in a tiny bit of gloating? #1 in Canada across all books. And #9 globally. And the books that are ahead of it are like How to Train Your Dragon and How to Love Your Caterpillar. So from real books, it's actually #1. Thank you. But despite the fact that it's #1 in Canada, apparently my home university is not very distressed at the fact that, dare I say, their most illustrious professor is now moving to the United States. That gives you a sense of how different two entities can view the same stimulus, in this case, me. The United States says, we want you here to be on our team. Canada says, get out, Jew. Probably not a good thing. Okay, so then I wanted to talk a bit about suicidal empathy for those of you who may not be familiar with it, and I'll try to link it to some issues relating to anti-Zionism. Empathy is a beautiful virtue to have. As a matter of fact, we are a social species. Therefore, we are expected to have empathy as a social lubricant, right? For you and I to have a meaningful conversation, I need to put myself in your mind, and you need to do the same with me. That's called cognitive empathy or theory of mind. So empathy is a beautiful thing. But like Aristotle explained to us several thousand years ago, all good things in moderation. He called it the golden mean. He specifically spoke about courage and how courage follows the golden mean. If you are a soldier and you are incredibly cowardly, hence you don't exhibit any courage, that's not a good thing. If you're a soldier and you exhibit too much reckless courage, then you will probably die very quickly. The optimal point is somewhere in the middle, yes? And that's called the inverted U. Too little, not good, too much, not good, and the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. And so, of course, what I argue in the book is that that exactly applies to empathy as well. If you have no empathy, you're likely a psychopath. But if you have too much empathy, as we see now, so suicidal empathy is comprised of 3 parts. It hyperactivates, it hyperfires, it is invoked in the wrong situation, and it targets the wrong targets. So Guatemalan illegal immigrants deserve more empathy than American vets. Repeat felons deserve more empathy than their victims. Rapists deserve, especially if they're rapists of color, then we really have to be empathetic. And the reason for that is because that rapist was born into a white supremacist society, so he's already been marginalized, he's already been punished. So for you to be so mean and non-empathetic as to now put him in prison simply is not kind. Try to be kinder, right? And so what I do in the book is I go through many, many of these examples, but now let's link it to issues related to Israel. And I'd like to here mention some of the worst anti-Zionists, the most execrable of all anti-Zionists. Those are Jewish anti-Zionists. And I'd like to talk about them. I'd like to talk about them using another one of my viral terms. Apparently, I have an uncanny ability to create new terms that then sort of go viral. Wood cricket Jews. Some of you have heard me mention that term, but for those of you who don't know what it refers to, let me explain it. And it actually explains why I use the neuroparasitological framework. So in the animal kingdom, when you study parasitology, parasitology is the study of parasite-host interactions. So a tapeworm is a parasite, but it parasitizes your intestinal tract. A neuroparasite is a parasite that needs to get ultimately to the host's brain, altering its circuitry to suit its interests. Now, a wood cricket, an actual wood cricket, abhors water. It wants nothing to do with water. But when it is parasitized by a hairworm, the hairworm needs the wood cricket to jump into water, merrily commit suicide, hence suicidal empathy, because that would suit the reproductive interest of the hairworm, because it could only complete its reproductive cycle in water. So that hapless wood cricket, once its brain is hijacked by this hairworm, it is simply a vessel for the interests of the hairworm. It no longer has personal agency. Well, wood cricket Jews are exactly a manifestation of that wood cricket. And let me give you a few examples. Let me start with the biggest of the degenerate wood crickets. Anybody want to take a guess who I might say? Who? Peter Beinart is a good one. I despise him, but no. Gabor Mate. See, Gabor Mate is so empathetic. He's so enlightened. He's such a philosopher of addiction that, by the way, he's a Holocaust survivor. In that, when he was 6 months old, he was taken and placed in another home to be protected from the Nazis. But 6 months old infants are not cognizant beings. So it really is a stretch to argue that I'm a Holocaust survivor. If he is a Holocaust survivor, then I too am a Holocaust survivor, because in the 1940s, I was swimming in my dad's testicles as a spermatozoa. So not only am I a childhood war refugee of Lebanon, I too am a Holocaust survivor. Now, the way he uses that narrative, which is it's very intelligent, it's duplicitous, it's Machiavellian, but it works. It said, if I am Jewish and I am a Holocaust survivor, and I tell you that the IDF puts the Nazis to shame, because I went through the Holocaust as a 6-month-old infant, so you should listen to me and believe me. So this is what a wood cricket is. Let me give you two other Jewish wood crickets. One, well, both of them not very known, but they exemplify the same kind of reflex. Tal Nitzan is a Jewish wood cricket. I discussed this example not in suicidal empathy, but in the parasitic mind. She was a doctoral student at Hebrew University she's Jewish. She wanted to demonstrate that the IDF engages in rampant rape of Palestinian women. So she went out, very assiduously trying to collect the data to document that the IDF soldiers are, rampant rapists. Well, she wasn't and by the way, she spoke to also Palestinian women, so it's not as though she just went to the IDF and said, hey, tell me, do you rape women? And so after she did all of her research, she wasn't able to identify a single instance of IDF raping Palestinian women. So now an honest purveyor of the truth, someone who is a true scientist, would say, okay, I proposed the hypothesis, the data didn't support it, so be it. Sometimes it happens. But she has to be wedded to the fact that Israel is truly a cancer to the world. And she's Jewish, living in Israel, studying at Hebrew University. So you know what she concluded? She said, aha, the fact that the IDF soldiers did not rape even a single woman, Palestinian woman, demonstrates how much they despise the Palestinians, that they weren't even worthy of being raped. Yeah. So now, sorry to get professorial on you for 2 seconds. Karl Popper, the famous philosopher of science, proposed what's called the falsification principle, that anything that is scientific, there needs to be data that could potentially falsify the theory. If there's no way for you to falsify a theory, then it is not within the realm of science. And let me give you a concrete example of that. The concept of destiny is not within the realm of science because you cannot falsify the concept of destiny. Why? Let's suppose I tell you I'm going to walk outside right now and I'm going to see if a car hits me as I cross the street. Well, if I cross the street and the car doesn't hit me, that was my destiny. If I cross the street and the car hits me, that was my destiny. Therefore, there is no data that would ever invalidate the fact that what is my destiny. Therefore, destiny is unfalsifiable. What Tal Nitzan did is exactly that. If the IDF soldiers raped Palestinian women, that is proof of how evil Israel and its soldiers are. If the IDF did not rape anybody, that demonstrates how evil in their othering of the Palestinian women. So it is a real parasitic idea. I'm not sure what is the way to solve it, but for those of you in the room, I hope none of you are ever angry at me because I maintain a relationship with Joe Rogan and so on. By the way, nothing upsets me more when Jews write to me angrily when I have to walk around all day long being protected for defending Jewish people. And usually the argument goes something like this. Why are you still friends with Joe Rogan when he's speaking to all sorts of, anti-Zionist freaks? Well, because Joe Rogan is courteous enough to invite me on his show so that I can have a conversation with him that will be consumed by 20 million people. There's a pragmatism here. If I were to disassociate myself from Joe Rogan because he speaks to some imbecile, and I disassociate myself from Elon Musk because he allows neo-Nazi accounts to be on, on X, and so on and so forth, I will end up speaking to very few people, maybe my wife and children, and that's about it. So to all of the astoundingly lobotomized and moronic Jews who send me those hate, perhaps reserve that hate to the people who truly want to kill you, as opposed to the ones who are standing tall to try to protect you and your children. I wasn't planning on finishing on such a dour note, but I'm worried that I might talk too much and then the panelists won't have a chance. So hopefully I can continue some of this discussion with the panelists. Thank you all for coming, and cheers.
Dr. Andrew Pessin is a professor of philosophy and founding director of the Institute of the Critical Study of Anti-Zionism. Drawing to his experience and postmodernism, his work examines the intellectual and cultural roots of anti-Zionism and its influence on academic discourse, identity politics, and debates surrounding Israel and the Jewish identity. Please welcome Dr. Andrew Pessin to talk about how postmodernism fueled anti-Zionism. Dr. Brandy Shufutinsky is a director of the program on education of national security at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, FDD, where she examines the intersection of education, national security, and the ideological threats, including anti-Semitism and extremism. Please welcome Dr. Brandy Shufutinsky as she examines how cultural Marxist frameworks helped normalize and institutionalize anti-Zionism within the modern education institutions. Welcome.
What a thrill to be here. What a thrill to see so many people, a packed room. What a thrill to see some young people amongst us. Sometimes we don't see that at these sorts of events. I invited two, so I'm responsible for two of them. What a thrill to share a stage with this illustrious panel. It is just wonderful to be here, and what an impossible act to follow. So I'll be brief. My name's Andrew Pess, and I think the most important thing you need to know about me is that I have founded the Institute for the Critical Study of Anti-Zionism, recognizing that the core of the problem ultimately is the academy, the university. It's this ideology that has been cooked up in the universities. Multiple generations of students have gone through the universities being indoctrinated. They spill out into the streets. They become Mamdanis, etc. And at this point, as part of it was an open and deliberate and intentional plan, the other side, the anti-Zionists, have captured the institution. Anti-Zionism as an ideology, a worldview, and a movement is by far the dominant voice on too many campuses, to the point where the other voices are silenced, sometimes absolutely ostracized and excluded, but mostly afraid to speak. So if we're going to fix this problem, it was several decades in the making. We actually watched it happen in slow motion. In some cases, some of our wood crickets participated in and promoted it, thinking it was a good thing. If we're going to fix the problem, this is a long game. This is a long-term game. And the way to do it, or at least one way to do it, is surprisingly something that we collectively, and by we I mean Jews, Zionists, and all sane, decent people, we actually haven't done over the last 20 years. We've been aware of the problem. All sorts of valuable things have been done, but what hasn't been done is a collective organized effort to dismantle the ideology which is producing the Jew hatred. We've had individuals writing papers along the way, but you know what? If you're in an environment where the dominant or only voice is anti-Zionist hate, and you write a paper criticizing Edward Said or something like that, it disappears into the ether. Right? We've been afraid to go after that ideology for a number of reasons, sometimes safety reasons. I myself was canceled ignominiously 11 years ago, getting international death threats. It's very unpleasant. But we've been afraid because the other side has managed in this complex stew of ideologies to capture the name anti-racism or the label of anti-racism for this set of ideologies that I prefer to call anti-Zionism. And so by definition, if you're critical of it, if you push back against it, you're a racist. And nobody wants that. So we've been silent. No more. We can't do that anymore. So what I'm trying to do, what we really need is some elders of Zion. And how pathetic and tragic we are that it seems to have fallen upon me to at least play that role in the academy, to mobilize, incentivize, coordinate, as the tagline of my institute goes. We need teams of scholars producing reams of scholarship about anti-Zionism. There's strength in numbers, there's courage in numbers. An individual professor, I can't tell you how many emails I'm getting from professors. I'm the only not anti-Zionist. You don't even have to be a Zionist. I'm the only not anti-Zionist on my campus, and I'm afraid to speak up. It's very scary and hard to do that. I have, as of this morning, 212 scholars on the roster. It's growing every day. I hope I will convince you to join me. We have over 4,000 followers on the Substack, growing every day, ixa.substack.com. Let's get a couple hundred out of here. These are 4,000 people who are very interested and concerned about the problem of anti-Zionism, primarily in the academy. We've already launched our initial scholarly projects, a webinar series. We're creating a multi-volume encyclopedia documenting everything you need to know about anti-Zionism and other projects. So I hope you'll check us out and join us. I was asked to sort of explain this slide, but the real expert on that is sitting next to me, so it's a little embarrassing that I'm going to give you a, 2-minute summary of this. But what I call anti-Zionism, or the set of ideologies which constitute anti-Zionism, is a frothing stew of a whole bunch of things up there. And so I thought what I would do is very quickly see how Zionism, as we understand it, gets converted into a caricature of itself once it's filtered through these ideologies. So Zionism, as we understand it, we've already heard it said this way a couple of times this morning, it's a national liberation movement for the Jews, who are an oppressed, persecuted, and indigenous people returning to their ancestral homeland for safety, security, maybe even prosperity. That's Zionism, and who could be against that for anybody, at least in principle? But when you start filtering it through these many ideologies, you will say the following to that. Well, that's a narrative. That's only a narrative, and it's one that serves the interests of the Jews, of course, and silences that of the oppressed party in this conflict, namely the Palestinians. And in fact, from the general left perspective, it's as coarse as this. Jews are associated with money, and therefore with capitalism, and therefore with the West. And indeed, post-Holocaust, Jews did start to prosper in some Western societies. But rather than see that as Jewish success in the face of discrimination and opposition, well, that's just a narrative serving Jewish interests. In fact, that happened because Jews basically became white or white adjacent and began to participate and benefit from white supremacy. Their success, in fact, coming at the expense of other marginalized people. So a positive thing has turned into a negative thing. And so now Jews are, if you're following this, white Western capitalists, which means they cannot be conceived of as oppressed, which combined with the fact that capitalism is the root of imperialism and colonialism, means that Jews cannot be conceived of as indigenous to some ancestral homeland in the Middle East. White Western capitalists can only be conceived as colonialists in the Middle East, and voila. Throw in a little Marxist historical materialism, if you know it. That's the idea that history is driven by material circumstances, not so much by ideas. So they will not see Zionism as a national liberation movement of an oppressed people, but it's basically an economic enterprise, bourgeois nationalism being the phrase, or bourgeois nationalist imperial colonial endeavor. So Zionism is no different from and intimately linked with Western European settler colonialism. Add one more little piece, go back to that racial component. Jews are seen as white despite having been exterminated as not white in large parts of Europe. And if they're white, then they're racists, and Palestinians, as people of color, are therefore victims. So Israel and Zionism is now a white Jewish supremacist enterprise, colonial enterprise, oppressing Palestinian people of color with racism in the West projected onto the Middle East conflict. And if you think about that whole thing, all of that is theory. It's the idea of Israel. It's the idea of Zionism. It bears, I would say, next to zero relationship to any empirical facts, but it doesn't matter. When you're in the grips of this theory, this ideology, any empirical facts you looked at, you're going to look at through the lens of this ideology. It doesn't matter anything Israel does, any policies Israel is. Israel is this thing that I just described in their theory. That's what we have to break. That's what we have to break, this ideology.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really an honor to be here and be on this panel. I want to talk to you about this image that you see behind you, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Most of my work is focused on K-12 education and the intersection of education and national security. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit about this book first. This book is a Bible in many colleges of education departments, at least in the United States. And what the theory holds that it preaches is that those who have achieved real or perceived success only achieve that through ill-gotten gain, so through the exploitation of others or goods. And those who haven't achieved success didn't do so because they were exploited or held down or oppressed by the oppressor. And I bring this up in how it relates to national security because that theory is at the crux of the Marxification of education. That's part of what the foundation being built in our K-12 schools is bringing. So when we talk about programs like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or sometimes SEL, social emotional learning, many times how those programs are actually implemented on the K-12 campus is based on this theory, which really creates a binary that is rigid and unbreakable. When school children, kindergarten through 12th grade, are taught through that lens, what it does is it eliminates the opportunity, the possibility for individual success. So it eliminates the things that Western civilization has been founded on: meritocracy, the respect for the individual, striving for excellence, liberties, freedoms. That's what we're seeing happen in the K through 12 space. Now, there have been conversations about what's happening in the academy and higher education, and the bridge between those two is actually pretty short. So if you think about everything that you spoke about, Andrew, all of the things that you spoke about, God, what's happening in the academy, well, that includes future teachers, future educators, administrators, they're all sitting in that stew of all of the theories that are pushing this ideology. And how that relates to anti-Zionism is really that Israel takes the form of all of the things that pedagogy of the oppressed stands against. Israel Zionism represents everything that the oppressed peoples of the world, third worldism, the global south are supposed to stand against. And we're seeing anti-Zionism institutionalized in spaces of education based on that theory, based on that binary of oppressor versus oppressed. So when you see school children being used as a leftist or Islamist army to come out marching in the streets, making certain demands of their school districts, demanding that their teachers union divest from Israel, demanding that they, stop the genocide in Gaza. It's because these kids have been sitting in classrooms where they've been stewing in this ideology and this theory. When you see maps of the Middle East that falsely label Israel as Palestine, it's because the idea of Jewish sovereignty goes against this theory and pedagogy of the oppressed. And how we're seeing that spill out from the K through 12 space into higher education is kids are spending 12, 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade, hearing nothing but this narrative. And they're arriving on college campus, hearing nothing but what you've mentioned from professors. And they're ready to use their college campuses as centers for activism. In the K through 12 space, we're seeing that happen with teachers' unions, where they're leading calls for things that have nothing to do with educating children, completely ignoring that K through 12 schools right now, at least in the United States of America, have seen some of the largest declines in learning since we've been recording. When we're looking at rates of literacy and rates of numeracy, they've all fallen off of a cliff, because instead of learning, instead of teaching, what's happening in education is activism. Activism has replaced scholarship. And part of the center of that activism is anti-Zionism. So what I do and what my team does at FDD, we look at, well, okay, where's this coming from? I can talk to you and tell you horror stories of all the bad things that Jewish students and Zionist students and students that believe in merit experience in the K through 12 classroom. And I'm sure you can tell me more of the same. But we look at what's behind it, who's funding it. So one of the questions I'd ask and that we research and look at is who's implementing the DEI policies? Who's actually been providing the teacher training, the teacher professional development, where teachers, educators are being told to bring these things into the classroom? Who's developing your children's curriculum? Well, some of the things that we found is terrorists. We have terrorists that are operating on American campuses and some Canadian campuses too. Actual terrorists, PFLP groups, associated groups. I'm sure you're aware because the United States and Canada designated Samadoun on the same date. The United States designated them for being a sham charity for raising funds for Hamas. Well, there are individuals, there are leaders of Samadoun that are operating on campuses today. They're doing teacher training, they're doing teach-ins, they're doing curriculum development, and it's all reaching our kids, our students in the K through 12 classroom and in the academy.
Naya. Token Jews are individual or organization that use their Jewish identity as a shield to legitimize Jew hatred, exclusion, violence, and attacks against the Jewish people and the Jewish state. They are not outside the cycle of libels. They are essential to it. Token Jews participate in all 4 stages of the cycle. Every era has had its own token Jews. The Nazi era had the Kapo. The Soviet Union had the Yevsetskaya, the world's first anti-Zionist Jewish organization established in 1918. And today, the Western world has groups such as JVP, IJV, and Neturei Karta. Different era, different regime. Same tactics used as few Jews to manipulate, divide, and legitimize hatred against many. And this is another excellent example from Associated Hebrew School. Please welcome from Associated Hebrew School the students, graded students, presenting the role of token Jews in legitimizing the cycle of libel.
I saw someone on the news saying that they were protesting against Israel as a Jew. There was a whole interview with them, and they kept pointing out how they were a part of a Jewish group. It all felt really weird.
Sometimes people use one person from a specific group to justify attacking the rest of the group.
Yeah, I've seen that too. It's called tokenization.
A token is when someone's identity is used like a stamp of approval.
For example, someone might say, "See, even that Jew agrees that attacking or blaming other Jews is okay."
But one person never speaks for an entire community.
JVP, IJV, Neturei Karta. There's always going to be people willing to lend their voices and identities to hate, but that doesn't make them right.
And it doesn't give them the right to speak on behalf of the rest of us.
When people use someone's identity this way, it can make hateful ideas seem more acceptable.
It can make people think that the conspiracy or accusation must be true.
But repeating those ideas still spreads the same libels and stereotypes.
And when those accusations keep spreading,
the cycle of libels starts again.
Libels leads to exclusion, leads to violence, leads to denial.
And that's why understanding how the cycle works is so important.
No one person can represent an entire group, and using someone's identity to justify hate only helps the cycle continue.
It helps when we're on watch for that kind of rhetoric, and understand that what's being done is just tokenization. When we're armed with knowledge, we can help break that cycle.
AHS works continuously with growing minds to situate them deeply in Jewish identity. Our students take pride in the fact that each one of them is a member of an exclusive club, the Jewish people.
Today, anti-Zionism is often treated as fashionable or morally virtuous instead of being recognized for what it really truly is, a modern form of Jew hatred. That is why this declaration matters. If we cannot clearly define the movement, we cannot effectively confront it. The Global Declaration established a line of moral clarity. Anti-Zionism is a Jew hatred. And from that clarity comes action, education, policy, institutional accountability, and coordinated response. We invite individuals, organizations, educators, and leaders to unite and sign the declaration because confronting anti-Zionism requires clarity, courage, and collective action. We have more than 3,000 individuals signed already globally. More than 50 institutions has joined as well and growing every day. Please sign the declaration. It's part of changing the culture. And when we change the culture from Jew hatred and that away from normalization of this fascism, then we definitely can change, including laws and all the policies around it. Thank you.